On a Wednesday night in Gosford, in the pink of the McGrath Foundation, pouring down with rain against Adelaide United's Starboy. With a coach in his first campaign, a squad decimated by the success of seasons past, and with a banner falling down, the Central Coast Mariners are premiers again after 12 years. One down, two to go. The AFC Cup decider on Monday morning, and then 3 A-League finals to make it the best season by an A-League team, perhaps ever. Mariners fans, do not blink, do not avert your eyes. Do not hide behind the reality and uncertainty of this fickle game. Dare to dream, believe in your team and soak it all in, for that is what being a football fan is all about. To live and die by the sword, the joy of triumph and the agony of defeat. Breathe it all in, because these opportunities do not come around very often, and for some, not at all, on this episode of the A-Leagues of Our Own podcast, presented by the Inner Sanctum. My name is Lachlan Avil, and joining me today is Jacob Stevens. Jacob, the Mariners have done it again.
They sure have, and sucks for all of the Wellington fans and the Knicks, but you can't say that they didn't deserve it.
No, Christian Montegan, hello to you. I'm sure there were some late nights for Knicks fans over in New Zealand, but not to be for them.
Good evening, Lockie. Yeah, it was pretty peak A-League to having to wait midweek to find out the result for the Premier's play. But yeah, like Jacob and you mentioned, fully deserved from the Mariners, who was basically coming, pretty much all season down to the wire, just the Mariners and the Phoenix. And yeah, just awesome to see Central Coast get the job done.
And Poletti as well. Hello to you. A momentous day in the A-League.
I think it depends on which fan base you ask as to whether it was momentous or not. It's certainly historic and could still prove to be, as you said, a very historic campaign for the team from Gosford.
Well, of course, the Mariners become premiers. It's the first time, as I say, they've done it in 12 years. But as the reigning champions as well, we heard the fans singing in the stadium, "We are champions." I'm not sure if they were referring to last year or I got the terminology confused for this year as well. But Jacob, they didn't have it all their own way. Your Adelaide United came out hard, easily had the better of the first half. But as the cliche goes, as champions do, they find a way.
Yeah, you mentioned Adelaide's performance, and I think a lot of people heading in, especially, Adelaide United fans in particular, were saying, look, the Knicks fans, don't get your hopes up having to rely on us to get a result here, because it's unlikely to happen. And I think that, the big issue and the big question mark going into the game was, how are Adelaide going to be able to contain the Mariners and their sort of free scoring form that they've been in, because the defence has been Adelaide's issue all season long. And to be honest, yes, the Mariners didn't score, but I don't think the defence did a great job. There was obviously that Kautak header that came down off the bar, was initially given and then overturned by VAR, and there were a couple other chances in that first half as well where, Ethan Cox in particular in his first game, was tested quite a bit early on by the Mariners. But you're right in that, Adelaide weren't just going to take the game lying down. That they went out there and they fought, even though there was nothing to play for Adelaide, all hopes of finals were gone. Colvier even said in the pre-match press conference that, none of the players were necessarily playing for their future or for their contracts next season. It was, everyone was pretty certain on where they stood in terms of where they'd be next season. So it was interesting to see that, Adelaide was still able to come out firing and yeah, like you said, had probably the better of the first halves, a couple of chances for Stefan Mork. The one player that did struggle to get into it was the player on his farewell, Nestori Irankunda, who, there could be any number of reasons for that. Obviously, we've seen him struggle against Jacob Farrell in the past, and that matchup was there again the other night. But like you mentioned, Lockie, champions find a way to win, and that's what the Mariners did, and they held strong. They capitalised on mistakes Adelaide made, particularly, Ryan Kitto with his marking error, and then there was that Ethan Alagich touch when playing out from the back in the second half that just sealed the deal. Max Ballard, I think it was, scored that one. So, yeah, that's the thing for if you want to win, the championship, if you want to win the Premiership, you've got to be able to capitalise on mistakes and take the gifts that the opposition give you. And that's what the Mariners did to their credit. And like I mentioned just before, they're very deserving winners.
Poletti, before we go on and give Mariners some more praise, of course, it was Irankunda's last game in the A-League. It was almost poetic that it was to be against Jacob Farrell and the Central Coast Mariners. We saw this brilliant storyline that was promoted through the week, regarding, them in the semi-finals last year, and Ewan Quinlan would come off the bench, Jacob Farrell would come off the bench, and there was a lot of tension there, and we got to see that spark up again tonight. That's a fun little duel that we had between two bright stars of the league.
Yeah, and it's a shame that we'll probably never see it again.
I know plenty of people were calling for Jacob Farrell to get a transfer to Borussia Dortmund, so we can have him coming off the bench there as well.
Yeah, sure, because Jacob Farrell's going to break into a side that's about that could potentially win the Champions League.
It's the right colours, okay?
It's not
really,
pink, is it?
I wasn't aware. I wasn't aware
No.
that the Mariners wore yellow and black. I thought they were yellow and blue.
Okay, well, you got to give me yellow at the very least.
Yeah,
Although Christian, you make a good point. They were actually wearing pink yesterday.
Yeah.
It's funny. They have this big moment, and of course, the pink game was supposed to be the penultimate round. The schedule being moved around is why this happened. But I did find it funny, Poletti, when they went to do the trophy lift, and suddenly they all had yellow shirts back on again. They were clear on the brand they wanted to put out there.
Yeah, that part of the presentation's funny. It's you go change into your home jerseys, but you think maybe a little bit more effort could have been made in putting the signage together for the presentation. I don't know. I think they got the priorities wrong.
It was a little bit ad hoc, and look, we've seen things like the Warren Dolan medal nights be cancelled for budgetary reasons. You'd imagine this would be in a similar vein, Christian. But regardless, we saw Adelaide United receive their premiership play in a pub one year. So in terms of on par, it's not doing too bad. But great moment for the Mariners, and of course, still 2 chances at more silverware in this year as well.
Yeah, you could see the emotion pour out straight away after the full-time whistle blew, from the coaching staff, the top hierarchy who came onto the pitch, celebrated. You see the hugging all over the pitch. You knew how much this meant to the club. And obviously, like you touched on, Lockie, they've got a chance to make history now to win that treble, to become, the first Australian side to do so, which would be just tremendous. But yeah, from now until the end of the season, it's just all about maintaining this good form, maintaining the players to keep them fit and healthy for the rest of the ride, because obviously they've still got this midweek game coming up in Oman, which we'll touch on a bit later on in the pod. But yeah, I mean, it's just fascinating how this squad, out of every squad in the A-League, has managed to pull this off. You would never have thought, really, considering the position they were in a few years ago. So yeah, I hope they do it. I hope they do go on to win the treble, because it'll be just a brilliant story just to go back on. It's one of those like Western Sydney moments when they won the Asian Champions League. It's just one of those where were you moments, and hopefully they can pull it off.
Jacob, that's part of the story as well. They won the championship last year, and because of their success as a development club, which most A-League clubs are, but particularly the Mariners, they lost a lot of their playing staff, and they lost their coach Nick Montgomery as well, and they lose the first 4 games of the season. And, it just makes this achievement all the more remarkable.
I think it goes to show the value in having a coach and a squad that fully back themselves and believe in what they're trying to do, but that are also, more than capable enough of being able to be adaptable and change things up when it doesn't work, or, if they're going in with their plan A and, they're not scoring goals, they can switch it up and try something different. It's also a case of having everybody chipping in. Jacob Farrell scored in this game against Adelaide. For some reason, before I said they didn't score in the first half, don't know where I got that idea from. And they did score in that first half, obviously, and maybe I'm just trying to relegate the memory of that game to the back of my mind. But no, but that's the thing. Like, everybody has chipped in for the Mariners this season, and a bulk of the goals have come from the likes of Angel Torres, who obviously now is no longer with the squad. So, it's a case of who's going to pick up those goals. But Ballard has shown that he can do it. Farrell can score a goal. Caltech's always a threat from set pieces. You have Josh Nisbet, who's started to get his scoring boots on towards the back end of the season. So it is a case of, having everybody buying into the same sort of mentality and the same methodology in the way that you want to play football. And that's what Mark Jackson's done really well. He stuck with what he was doing through those first 4 games where they lost all their first 4 games, I think, didn't they? And, and they didn't look particularly good at that point in time, but they stuck with it. And that's the thing that I think sort of differentiates them a little bit from some of the other clubs in the league, is that, they fully believed in what they were trying to do, and they knew that they had the talent on the pitch and off the pitch to be able to manage it. And that's exactly what they did.
And not even to mention Marco Tullio, who they lost halfway through the season and had to replace, who I found in my research today for the AFC Cup. He is still the leading goal scorer of the AFC Cup, if my numbers are true, despite not even participating in the knockout stage. But Poletti, you know, the versatility of their team, the fact that they've relied on their scouting network in the way they have, are they one of the best pound-for-pound A-League men's teams that we've seen?
On the balance of things, you'd probably have to say yes. I mean, it's, you know, we touched on the departures, and I don't think that can be understated just how much of an impact those departures have. I mean, you lose half your starting 11 and you lose your coach. You come in, get absolutely slaughtered in the first 4 games of the season, and then you go on this steep run in continental football, which we know isn't easy for A-League sides, particularly when you've got to travel to the Western zones, which thankfully they haven't had to do too much yet, but they have had to go to some pretty far-flung places, connecting flights, you know, all that fun stuff that comes with international travel. And they've kept consistent across the league as well. They've been putting up results. They've only had a couple of, I guess, anything you might consider a shock loss this season, you know, all of which are probably in understandable circumstances. I'm not going to pretend like I remember every single game the Mariners have played. They've played over 40 of them, which is almost unheard of in Australian football. So it's been a tough season. This idea of pound for pound, I guess it depends on, in comparison to, you know, like which teams are we talking is the best? Are they up there with Barcelona? Probably not. The way errors differ in football and just how sharp tactics can change. I mean, I think we talked earlier this week, or it might have been a different part I was listening to, but just the amount of goals that have been scored in games this season. You know, it's almost 3.5 per game.
Yeah, that was us.
Okay, what? Okay. I'm having a shocker of a week, in case you can't tell. You know, almost 3.5 goals a game. You know, like it shows that scoring's on the rise. Now, differing reasons, whatever, but like it's so. I think it's hard to just compare errors.
Yeah, well, I think maybe I have got it a bit ahead of myself, and Mariners fans might not like us comparing dynasties before they've even won the treble. So let's move on, and we're going to preview as best we can the AFC Cup final that's going to be played 2 a.m. on Monday morning. The Central Coast Mariners against Al Ahed, which are a Lebanese team, but of course the game being played in Oman. So the question of who is Al Ahed? They are the reigning premiers of the Lebanon Premier League. They currently sit second in this season. It is their 12th appearance in the AFC Cup, and they were victors in 2019. So no strangers to this competition whatsoever. They had a bit of an interesting time during the group stage, and somehow it's worked out that they've had an even more complicated path to the final than the Mariners have, which is ridiculous in itself because the West is supposed to be simple. But they had a Palestinian team, Jabal al-Mukabir, withdraw after 2 games due to the conflict in that part of the world. And one of those games was a 4-0 loss to Al Ahed. So they ended up playing the rest of the group stage and cancelling those games, so they finished second in their group of 3 and only qualified as the best runner-up in the West from those 3 groups. But the maths is interesting. It doesn't quite work out because they finished with 2 wins and 2 losses, 6 points from 4 games. Whereas there was another Egyptian team in a different group that finished with 3 wins, 2 draws, and 1 loss for 11 points. So if you work out the points per games, they don't win that battle. So if you then add in the result that they did have against the team that withdrew, they do win the points per game. So some interesting numbers there, but they did progress as the best runner-up. They go into the knockouts. They beat Al Karaba, which is an Iraqi team, in the Western Zonal semis on penalties. And then they matched up again with Al Nada, the Omanian team, who they finished below in the group stage, but then went on to beat them 3-2 on aggregate. And the interesting thing about that is that the second leg of that tie was played at the Sultan Qaboos Sports Complex in Muscat, which is also the venue for the final. So, Christian, no strangers to the competition. They've won it before. They're not playing in their home stadium, as the Western team has the right to do in this particular year, but is close, a lot less travel for them, and it's a stadium that they are somewhat familiar with as well.
Yeah, they obviously have the upper advantage given that sense. Obviously, playing at home, like it just fell upon this time of year that I think it alternates in years. That you were saying previously, Lockie, that
Yep.
so obviously they've got the benefit of that, which is fortunate for them, unfortunate for the Mariners, obviously. But is 11 on Premier League still going, or has their season ended?
I believe it is still going.
Yeah, okay. So I was going to say at least both teams are sort of on the same level playing field in that sense that, the Mariners, obviously, they can't really rest players having, the A-League finals coming up. Obviously, they've got the week off, which is beneficial for them, but obviously having played midweek. So both teams have that, that disadvantage in a sense that they're still playing midweek games on top of that weekend game. So, and they're sitting second in the league as well. So they've still got something to fight for there. So, yeah, these one-off games, you never know. Obviously, it's always a toss of the coin, really. It's not a two-legged affair. So, unfortunately for the Mariners, they can't, take a result back home, which would have been, fascinating to see how that played out. But yeah, I just think, I can't really speak upon the opposition because I haven't obviously watched any of them play this season. But from a Mariners point of view, it's a completely new experience playing in a final, everything on the line in this cup competition. So could that provide a new experience for them? Something different? I don't know. But yeah, it'll just be fascinating because you don't really know, what to think of this matchup, or you can't really analyze it probably because, like I said, we don't really watch the Lebanese Premier League, so we can't, obviously, I'm not going to pretend that we watch it. So we can only speak from a Mariners point of view and say, they've got the right team, the right attitude, the right mentality to definitely go over there and get a result and lift the trophy. It's just about how the matchup works. It'll be really interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, so very difficult to watch the Lebanese Premier League. Very difficult to find information on the Lebanese Premier League as well. In terms of their squad, most are Lebanese players. They have a trio of Syrians, and then they have a Scottish striker as well thrown in there. His name is Lee Irwin. He came off the bench and scored a double in the last round to get them through. That's about as much research as I could find, Poletti. I think Christian's right that, if we had at least 180 minutes or, even longer than that, I think we'd all say the Mariners with at least 50% of game time at home would be the firm favourites. But, that away travel is just a whole different ball game in Asia, and you kind of never know how it's going to shake out. But they also have had to deal with a fair bit of adversity already this season, getting stuck in Kyrgyzstan, having an extra couple of days, flying through Korea, and being part of that group and dealing with that together, I think galvanizes them, and that's a strength for theirs. But there's nothing that can really replace 20 hours for your legs on a plane. It's just going to take a little bit of a hit.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And the point you mentioned about not being able to find any sort of information, or it's hard to find information on the Lebanese Premier League. If you go to betting applications, for example, you can go for the Kuwaiti Premier League, the Bangladesh Premier League, the Thai League, J2, J3, the Omani Professional League Cup. You can't go to the Lebanese Premier League. So
right.
that should kind of give you an indication as to the difficulty of information if betting companies aren't even offering much on the league, given that you can bet on basically anything in Australia. But yeah, no, it's going to take a big hit for the Mariners, as you said. I think the fact that, you win the Premier's Plate, you kind of get into that celebratory mood, but then you've basically immediately got to go home, get packed, and get on a bus to go straight to the airport is probably going to make that a little bit difficult because it's just a huge swing of emotions. I don't know if there's a direct flight to Oman. I can imagine they probably have the detour via the UAE or
Qatar or something.
Qatar or Singapore or something like that. Like it's probably multiple flights again. Look, I'd like to think that the Mariners will be able to do it. Mark Jackson has said that he feels his side plays his best football when their backs are against the wall, and can your backs be any more against the wall than this?
And that has the effect, again, of galvanizing people behind a common goal and can help in that way. So, look, as I said, it's a very exciting time for the Mariners team, club. If you're a fan, as I said, don't shy away from this moment. I think that's what you sign up for as a football fan. You got to live it and breathe it. And if it goes well, then great. But if not, let the chips fall where they may. Of course, the other thing we're going to look forward to today is the A-League Final Series. We have our top 6. The order is set. We've watched the games, come here, talk about it, who's doing well, who's doing bad. So we're going to give our best crack at previewing and predicting the finals bracket here tonight. So First up, of course, are our elimination finals, Sydney FC versus the Macarthur Bulls and Melbourne Victory versus Melbourne City. The Melbourne Derby on Sunday afternoon. Jacob, I'm going to let you take your pick one of these games. How do you think it's going to play out and who's going to get the chocolates?
Let's go with the Melbourne Derby because that's a fun one. I see Victory winning that. It's pretty easy for somebody to say, Victory will win that because they've been the better team this season. But you've got to remember as well with derby games, anything goes there. With City, McLaren's scored a goal in that last game for them. Has he found form again? City, I think, are a team that have a lot of really good pieces but haven't been able to put it all together at the same time this season. They've got the likes of Tolgay Arslan in the centre of the park who's been absolutely outstanding. Jamie McLaren, who's not been able to really find any form and he's not played a hell of a lot because he's been on the bench. Matthew Leckie was injured early on. Even the likes of Leo Natel and Jackalish were, they find themselves in good positions and then they just struggle with that end product. So I think it's a case of, City it's not even an inconsistency thing. It's just that they just haven't really got going. And I think that if they do get going, they can be a really big threat here. So I don't think that it's, necessarily a done deal for Victory here. I do think that they'll be up against it. And, City, they've got a couple of players now. McLaren's obviously leaving. Curtis Good, it's announced, he'll be leaving as well at the end of his contract. So they've got players here who this is going to be their last chance to fight for a championship with City. And, that could put a lot onto those players and give them that boost that they need to really get things going. But I do see Victory winning that one. I think with the sort of form that Daniel Arzani is in, he's been absolutely electric the last few weeks. And I think if Popovic can continue to get him on the ball and continue to play to his strengths, then, Victory are almost unstoppable. And they've had a very good backline so far this season as well. There were a lot of games, obviously, in that middle part of the season we were talking about. They were drawing a lot, but that's actually a credit to their defence because they didn't ship that one goal more and end up losing them. And it kept them, in that title fight almost until second or third final week. So, they've got a really strong defence against a City team that's been spluttering all season long. So I think that they'll probably get it done in the end of the day.
And to jump on that point about the defence as well, I think we talked about this last week that the personnel, that back four is very key as well. And I went back and looked at some of the numbers. And when Melbourne Victory have Jason Guerrier, Damien De Silva, Rod McMiranda, and Adama Traore, their preferred back four in the team, they only lost one game all season, and that was courtesy of a 95th minute own goal for Rod McMiranda against Wellington Phoenix. So they don't lose games with that back four, and they've never been beaten this season by more than one goal as well. So I put forward the case that Victory won't lose this game unless it goes to penalties. I just think that the back four is so solid and they've done pretty well even when they aren't in there. But Christian, I'm leaning towards the Victory. I think they'll get it done in regular time. But Melbourne City, they've had, 3 of these 7-8 goal wins, something like that throughout the season. So if you catch them on a good day, they're scary. And in a derby, you never know.
Yeah, I'm just judging off, the past 3 derbies this season. There's all been extremely tight, closely contested affairs. I think Victory but maybe either extra time or penalties. I think it's going to go the distance. Just like I said, I think it's going to be, extremely close. I mean, Jacob and I had this argument on the last pod about what do we worry most about the Victory? Is it the defence and the ability to maybe lose a lapse in concentration here or there in moments during a game, or is it the lack of finishing in front of goal, which you've touched on basically all season long? I do agree with Jacob that, the attack, that could be an area where this could really cost Victory, especially given how many goals City have scored in these past few weeks. Have they started to click into gear now? Obviously, McLaren getting back into form, as Jacob's touched on as well. It is a scary proposition, and this Victory defence, with that back four that you did say, they've obviously only lost one game all season, but have they been cohesive all season? There's been a bit of chopping and changing, throughout the season. Popovic had to plug in a few holes here and there. So, yeah, obviously it's an elimination final. You can't make any mistakes. It's the old cliche, but you just can't in these types of moments. But in saying that, I do expect Victory to get it done. I think Fornaroli has a massive game here. He's going to step up when it matters most. And in front of that Victory crowd, we know how much they mean to the club. I think, they'll get it done. Just.
Of course, the additional context to that back four conversation, which I don't think we mentioned because the news came out on Tuesday, is that Jason Guerrier has his ban reduced from 2 games to 1. So he will be available, and they will have their preferred back four. Poletti, give us your quick tip for this one and then move us on to Sydney MacArthur.
So, in recent memory, there's only been one side that's won this fixture 6-0 and 7-0. That being said, there's also been 4 scoreless draws in the A-League men's competition this season, and 2 of them have been in the Melbourne Derby. I've got City doing it. I think it's going to go to extra time. I think Melbourne Victory have just been so hit and miss this season. And I say that the only consistency with Victory is the fact that they keep drawing games. And that just gives me the vibe that this game's just going to go to extra time. And I think the class of City might just be able to outdo it. I think they'll want to send Jamie McLaren out on a high. I think they'll want to send Curtis Good out on a high. You can't underestimate how much that do it for your teammates camaraderie just can lift a side that may not have it. This isn't your typical 3v6 matchup because both sides play out of this stadium. They'll know every inch of that turf. I think that this is going to be City in extra time or penalties. And then we're going to move on to, as you said, Sydney and MacArthur. I got MacArthur, but with no conviction whatsoever. I think that the last time they played at the Sydney Football Stadium, it was a 2-0 victory to MacArthur. I believe Sydney went down to 10 in that game in the first half. The last 3 fixtures have seen MacArthur win by an aggregate scoreline of 6-0. I think the fact that they just did it with 9 against Sydney FC will play into that a lot more than I think a lot of people might anticipate. I remember sitting in the stadium for that a couple of weeks ago. I was in the press box, and once they went down to 9, it just felt like, right, Sydney are going to get a goal, and they did until it came back for offside. So, and then MacArthur just really sort of rallied and stopped Sydney from doing anything. As good as Uffy has been at the helm for Sydney FC since taking over very early in the season for Corica, there have been times this season when Sydney have struggled. And I think the Perth Glory game is going to fill a lot of people with a false confidence about it because, as I think Christian has said, I know Robbie Thompson has said, it really has been pathetic Perth. Or was it Daniel McBrain that said that on A-League off air? It was one of the two. Apologies to whichever one. Or maybe it was both of them. I don't know. Anyway, moving swiftly back to our podcast.
You kept trying to get us on different podcasts today.
Yeah.
I think that game's going to fill a lot of people with a lot of false confidence. Sydney FC have received a number of red cards this season, in the first half. I don't know. I just think that the way Milo Stojovski has this side playing, I know they just went down 3-0 to Wellington, but Wellington away is always a tough trip, particularly this season with the way that Giancarlo Italiano has his side setting up at home. I don't know. I just think the matchup favours MacArthur just a little bit more than Sydney. But as I said, I say this with absolutely no confidence. This could very much be a, toss of the coin, pick 'em, have your fun.
Looking at this game, I think MacArthur, to be honest, are the only team in the top 6 that I feel can't go on and win the whole thing. I don't have that belief that they could do it for 4 games in a row. Perhaps they do it against Sydney. They have beaten them twice this year in very difficult circumstances, but I think that win with 9 men is really going to rev Sydney up. They're not going to let that happen again. And whilst the Bulls have been a bogey team for the Sky Blues, I have Tala getting them into shape and getting it done. Christian, what about you?
So the stat that actually caught me by surprise that I saw today was MacArthur actually lead against Sydney. It's a combined scoreline of 6-0 in the past 3 meetings. So I was like, wow, I did not expect that. So I think, this upcoming matchup is so tough to preview because I just think this result depends on which MacArthur side shows up on the night because, they've shown this season that they can play on the counter-attack with quick transition. They can take the game to perhaps not over the course of the game, but they have their moments and they can also suck the life out of the game like we saw when they went down to 9 men and they got the result against Sydney. But in saying that, they just haven't put the whole package together. So I'm just going to go with Sydney only just because of their recent form and the good football that they're producing this season. But yeah, it's going to be very tight.
And of course, of MacArthur's last 3 games, the loss came with De Villa in the team, and the wins came with De Villa out of the team and receiving red cards, Jacob. Maybe that's the secret.
Maybe it is, but they'd be pretty foolish to not play De Villa in such an important game. But no, I'm with you too. I'd have Sydney winning it. I just think that the style of football that Sydney play is tailor-made for finals football. It's very boom or bust, and that's kind of what you need in finals football. Is if you're going to be on it, you're going to win it, and there's nobody can even get close to you. Obviously there's a lot of risk in the style of football that they do play, and Christian, you touched on that MacArthur have looked good on the counter at times in those transitional phases of play. But I'm just crazy, but I do believe that the sort of, high pressing sort of gonzo football that Sydney like to play, or have shown that they like to play this season, I think that's sort of tailor made for these games where, there's a lot of pressure on both teams. And, if you're pressing the team as high and as intensely as Sydney do, you're just opening up the chance for mistakes for the opposition to creep in. And I think that's where that ever decisive moment might come from.
Okay, so Poletti's in their own little bubble. They've got a different set of semi-finals, and then Jacob, Christian and myself have the Mariners versus Sydney and Wellington versus Victory. Let's do both at the same time. Mariners-Sydney, I think, is really interesting because we've talked about the fact that Mariners lost those first 4 games. Since then, they've only lost 2 the rest of the season, but they've both been to Sydney FC. So that's going to be a hell of a matchup if that eventuates. I back Mark Jackson over 2 legs. On the emotional side of me, just wants to believe in this Mariners story as well. I hope that Jackson will have learnt from those 2 games where they lost against the Sky Blues. And I think over 2 legs, I'm giving them the edge. And with those blowouts from Sydney, we've never seen them back it up. So I just think over the 180 minutes, the Mariners will have the strength. And in terms of Wellington Victory, unfortunately, that might lead to a little bit of a boring tie there because we've seen them have, a 1-1 draw with the Knicks not having a shot on target, and then a 95th minute winner for the Wellington to get over the line. So I'm going to give the edge to Wellington. I back them over 180 minutes as well, the way they like to play in pairs. So I'm sending the Mariners and the Wellington Phoenix through to my grand final. Christian?
Yeah, I just see Sydney as a bogey team for the Mariners, like you touched on. Obviously, those 2 defeats of the Mariners coming at the hands of Sydney, 5-1 combined scoreline. So I just think it's a bad matchup for the Mariners. Like Jacob touched on before, the high press, I think the Mariners might get caught out on 1 or 2 occasions. So I've got Sydney there going through in maybe perhaps a slight upset to many people. And then the other semi-final, I've got the Phoenix just solely based on going into New Zealand in the second leg. I just don't think Victory will do enough at home in the opening leg to take anything back over there and to make a real sort of fight of it.
Tickets already selling like hotcakes, by the way, for that game in a couple of weeks' time. Jacob, where do you see it?
Yeah, so I'm with Christian for both of them. I see Sydney and Wellington going through. Same reasoning for that Sydney Mariners matchup is just that Sydney have had the upper hand over the Mariners this season, and I know that MacArthur have had the sort of advantage over Sydney, but I do think that, again, I'm a firm believer in the sort of football that Sydney have been playing, and I absolutely love it. So maybe this is just a little bit of heart over the head sort of thing, but yeah, I've backed them to do it. And look, it's not going to be an easy fixture for them, but I mean, that home leg for the Mariners is the second leg, so I think if Sydney can get a decent lead and carry that into the second leg, then the Mariners could be under a lot of pressure. And we saw with games, the second leg against Abdi Shatar, for instance, it took them a while to really get into that, and they needed a goal to win it. So I think that if they're sort of in that same situation again, they could struggle, and that's where Sydney get up. And then Wellington, well, we were saying on the live stream that they just don't lose at home. So I think that Victory are going to really, really struggle in that second leg, and Wellington, yeah, I've given them the advantage there, and they'll go through for the final.
All right, and then Poletti, what's happening in your little parallel universe?
So I've got Wellington beating MacArthur over the 2 legs. MacArthur just do not match up well with Wellington. I don't think they ever have in MacArthur's short history in the league. There might be a couple of games that I'm kind of blending all together, but I don't think they've ever really matched up well tactically, stylishly, depending, like even different coaches. It's just, I don't know, just something about that fixture just always seems to go the favour of the Knicks. So I think over 2 legs, that's fine. For the Mariners, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. They've played over 40 games this season. I think that eventually the petrol just has to run out of the tank, and at $2.30 a litre, I just don't know if the Mariners can afford to refill at the moment on their shoestring budgets. Maybe if they win the AFC Cup, they can afford to refill. But I just think, touching back on to what I touched on in the first leg, I think that if City do beat the Victory, and I think they will, that this idea of trying to send McLaren and Curtis Good out a winner, as well as what I expect will probably be some other departures, it seems like just with those two leaving, City just look like they're going to go into some sort of rebuild. And so I can imagine there's going to be a few players leaving the club, but we'll obviously have to wait for the club to confirm that. So I think that City will beat the Mariners over the two legs. It'll be a very close, very tight contest, probably maybe like a 3-2 in aggregate, a 2-1 sort of vibe. Is low scoring. It's going to be intriguing football to watch. Is probably the best way to put that. So yeah, I've got Wellington versus Melbourne City in the grand final, and I think that Wellington are going to sell out the cake tin, and Alex Paulson's going to get the Joe Marston medal for a double-digit save performance in like a 1-0, 2-0 sort of victory. And what would be hilarious is if the APL just decided to play this game in Sydney anyway.
I thought, no, we've gone back on that. Not happening. Interesting, Poletti, because my grand final is Central Coast versus Wellington, so obviously played in Gosford. But I actually have also picked Alex Paulson.
Well, it won't be played in Gosford.
Sorry. Yes, there might not be played in Gosford. In New South Wales. Yes, sorry. Thank you for that correction. But I also have Alex Paulson as my Joe Marston medalist. Now, I think looking back to the game that they did play at Gosford a couple of weeks ago, you just look at the tactics and how they set up. It's going to be a tight game. It's not going to be a blowout either way. That's just not going to happen with these two managers. So I think a couple of moments that didn't fall the Phoenix's way in that game, I think they're going to this time. Alex Paulson's going to come up big with a couple of saves, and I think that'll be enough to make him, I believe, just the third goalkeeper to win the Joe Marston medal after Matty Ryan and Lawrence Thomas. Let's go to Jacob first. You guys had the same grand final.
Yeah. Sorry.
I didn't say who was going to win. I think Wellington's going to win. I think Alex Paulson's going to come up clutch, win the Joe Marston medal, and they're going to get it done by no more than a goal, potentially in extra time.
To be fair, it'd be hard pressed to give the Joe Marston medal to the losing goalkeeper.
Yeah, that would be hard, yes.
But no, so on to my final, and the same one as Christian. It's Wellington-Sydney. As Poletti said, Wellington will pack out Sky Stadium, and it'll be just fantastic to watch, I reckon. Two teams that obviously very, very different from each other in the ways that they like to play, especially Wellington at home. As we know, they like to stay quite strong defensively and solid, and as I said before, they just never look like losing at home. And so I do have them probably a 1 or a 2-0. I think it'll be a pretty close run affair, and I think Sydney will be in it for the most part. But my Joe Marston medalist is who, just completely pure, just throwing it out there, I'm just saying it's going to be Costa Barbarouses. I think he's the sort of player that could really hurt Sydney on the counter-attack, and I reckon he could get a goal against his former club, put the nail in the coffin, win it for the Phoenix.
Yeah, I've gone for Phoenix to win as well. I think they'll have just a bit too much for Sydney in the end. Home crowd will just be massive for them. Just hopefully a sellout there we see. And then for the Joe Marston medal, I've gone for Costa Barbarouses as well. So Jacob's probably me there.
Great minds think alike.
Barbarouses has actually scored in both of the previous meetings with Sydney this season, which is interesting. So I just think this award goes to a forward who impacts the game in that way. I think he'll make a massive difference. So trying to pick Sydney apart in those one or two key moments, and he's been brilliant this season, as is the whole squad. But I just think, the award will go to him.
So Christian's taking the embodiment here of work smarter, not harder, because he can't get his own predictions right, so he's just piggybacking.
Okay, for total transparency, I made everyone submit their predictions anonymously earlier in the day, so there was no copying going on whatsoever. I had mine submitted. Yeah, I had mine submitted before I saw anyone else's, so it's all above board. Unlike the predictions game, that's turned into a bit of a Wild West.
Jacob Slack and,
nick the predictions. All right, well, there you go. There are our paths to the finals, and we've all picked the Phoenix as the champions, haven't we? So a couple of different routes.
So that means Melbourne Victory are going to win.
Yeah, absolutely. It's never going to happen. Apologies, Perth glory. Another difference that we're going to see in finals this year is the addition of live VAR. Now, Poletti, you cover this for the Inner Sanctum. This is similar, but not the same to what we saw in the Women's World Cup. The idea is that the on-field review will happen at the screen as normal, and upon completion, referees will then have their microphones activated to tell the fans in the stadium and those at home a little bit of rationale behind the decision. So this is not hearing the process unfold as it happens. This is communicating with the referee to learn a little bit about why they gave their decisions.
Yeah, so I want to go back to the press release for a moment because I think the wording here is critical. So where are we? So subsequently, the referee's microphone will be activated, allowing both stadium attendees, broadcast viewers to hear the rationale for the decision before it is officially confirmed on the field. When a factual review takes significant time before a decision is made, the referee will also make an announcement to explain the rationale. I think the wording of significant time is deliberately obtuse because what is significant time? Is it 30 seconds? Is it a minute? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 5 minutes? Like, how long is that length of time?
Yeah.
And then when taking that into account is to hear the rationale for the decision. So before it is officially confirmed on the field. So is this a case of it's, okay, we've taken a look at the footage, we've seen that the ball has hit the hand, and we've determined that it's penalty for handball, or are they actually going to go a little bit more in depth, or is that only going to be for a factual review? So I don't know. For me, the wording does seem a little bit obtuse, but I think any sort of progress towards this, getting to hear what's actually happening between the VAR, between the person operating the VAR and the referee in real time is a good thing. I know you and I see that little smirk, don't worry. I know you and I went back and forth on this a little bit. Look, I don't necessarily like the idea of football just taking everything directly from other sports, because I think football is its own beast in the way that it operates. But when you look at something like rugby league, when you look at something like cricket, where we actually get to hear the process in real time, we get to hear the thought process in real time. It helps you understand the decisions a lot more. It doesn't mean you agree with said decisions, but it helps you understand them. And I think, like, if we're looking at this, we've seen some of these decisions take up to 3 minutes before they're given. Like, the Ivan Vujica decision immediately comes to mind. We're all baffled, where it's like the longer it goes on, the more it's going to be a red card. So I think just to hear that process in real time would be fantastic. So I think, anything that gets us towards that is a good thing. Australia has shown that, and the head of referees, Nathan McGill at Football Australia, sort of backed this up with his statement, in this press release, that, like, Australia's been leading the way on this. We were one of the first top professional leagues in the world to implement VAR ahead of the 2016-17 final series. And this is something they've apparently been pushing for a long time, and IFAB and FIFA have finally come to the party on it. So I think that, as much as I think a lot of Australian fans don't like us being played the guinea pig, I think the FA are more than happy to, maybe not have the country played as a guinea pig, but they're happy to help implementation of changes forward. Yeah. And I think that's only a good thing that, might help, might help the league and the country, down the line.
Yeah, so look, as you know, I disagree with you on the idea of hearing live conversations. I just think that everyone thinks they want to know how the sausage gets made, but when they actually look under the covers, maybe it's not as pretty as your first thoughts. But there's plenty to go into with that, and I think we'll put some time aside for VAR after we've seen the process play out, because we still have a bit to get through today. Well, let's go on. So we just did our finals predictions. We're going to go cash in some receipts now from some other predictions we did a little while ago, back for our Christmas episodes. And I already see some shakes of the heads in front of me on the call here. We did our rankings for what we thought the A-League men's season ladder would look like at the end of the regular season. So us four in here. Chris also did his predictions as well. We all went 1 to 12. We gave our arguments, and we're going to count up the points. So the scoring system is however many positions away from a team like the prediction was from the real result is a point, and then the lowest points overall win. So if Christian picked Adelaide to be in 8th, and they finished 8th, which he didn't, we'll get to that later, then he would get 0 points for the Adelaide team. And then you do that 1 point if 6th or 7th and so on, you add them all up. So, some notable performances. We were all pretty far away on the Mariners. That we all had them pretty far down. Credit to Chris. He had them in 6th making finals. None of us in this had them making finals. We only had them as high as 8th, which looks a little bit silly now. 4 of us had Wellington as premiers, except for Christian, who had the victory. So we all missed on that as well. To be fair to Christian, he and myself got the Bulls spot on in 5th. Chris and Poletti both got victory spot on in 3rd. Jacob, you were the only person not to get a team spot on at all.
Embracing my inner Christian there. That's.
However, you also had 6 teams just 1 place away, which was equal best of the group with Chris. So that everyone had little wins and little losses here and there. Time for the leaderboard. I'll go from 5th up. Can we get a little drum roll? A little bit of anticipation. A little bit of atmos.
And 5th place is
place.
me.
Put one in post-processing.
5th place, 28 points. And on the tiebreaker of 0 guesses exact is Jacob Stevens.
I thought I played it safe at the time. I was like, yeah, I've not taken many risks here. Like, this is
so you had
so
lots
foolish.
of 1s and 2s. Obviously, the Mariners with it was a 7, and the Wanderers you scored high on. You put them in 3rd when they actually finished in 7th. So that was a big point deficit for you. In 4th place, also on 28 points, but with 1 team spot on, Poletti.
Ooh.
Yeah. Got the victory spot on. Poletti
Nice, to be honest.
just a few of those 3s in the mid-range. You had the Bulls in 2nd, which probably hurt you relative to the rest of us, but a couple of those 3s, the Wanderers, Brisbane as well, get them down to 2s, you will be in contention. 3rd place on the podium. Christian's excited because he's got a medal. But it is in the bronze medal position is Christian Montegan. The famous Adelaide United in 2nd really did hurt you. If you just managed to squeeze that a bit lower.
That's what I was thinking. Is how's he gotten what? That was what, 10 points for that? 9 points?
6
6 points.
2nd to 8th. So that was your big score, but you had 2 zeros and a fair few 1s as well. So you had a couple of bad ones, but the rest was good.
It's all about the 1s, just racking up the 1s. That's what it's about.
Racking up the 1s.
Speaking like you know what you're doing now.
Raise those 1s, baby.
That's all it's about.
So then, that leaves myself and Chris McPherson. Now, I can reveal that Chris and I both tied on 26 points, which was 2 better than the rest of you.
So how have you rigged this so that you win the tie?
Okay. You know, we have a little spreadsheet where we manage all of our podcast stuff. Go on there right now. I put all the numbers up. Go and audit it for yourself. The predictions are on social media. They've been there for months. Everyone can go check this out, all right? Chris and I are on 26 points. So dead even, which is 2 better than the rest of you. Chris had 1 team spot on, which was victory in 3rd. I had the Bulls spot on in 5th, and I also had Western United spot on in 11th. So I take the double, got the Dove predictions win. I got the A-League men's prediction as well. I'm coming for the predictions game in the regular season as well. I'm on the double. I'm like the Mariners. I'm going for the treble this year. Let's go.
And hopefully, like the Mariners, you'll fall and fail and not win anything.
Well, I'm going to make myself some kind of trophy because I feel like it's. But there you go. Lachlan Avil, champion of the Christmas predictions in both the women's and the men's. The Nostradamus of the A-Leagues of our own podcast, as Chris would say. I feel like the 3 people looking at me right now are getting quite bored. So let's move on. We're gonna finish with Jamie McLaren. He will leave the A-League at the end of the season. We thought it might be to Auckland City for a little while. However, that was not the case. The quote is an opportunity outside of the A-Leagues. My first thought was weird for him to go to the NPL, but no, they just didn't want to say Australia because, of course, that would include New Zealand. The popular rumours, India, I believe America, a couple other places in the Middle East as well. But India is mooted as the top destination, Jacob, and he leaves a A-League champion as well. 115 goals with City, of course, more than that overall. 3 premiership plates and 1 championship as well.
It's those goals, 115 goals. That's just... How do you score that many goals? It's actually insane. He's been so good for such a long time in this league, and people forget as well that it wasn't just while he was at City. He was great for Brisbane before then as well, and one of the all-time legends. And I mean, the league has had some very, very good players, but he's that sort of Bessart Berisha. You can always rely on him to score a goal when you need it. As we saw on the weekend, they needed that goal. He's the one who came up with it for them against, was it Western United? So, it's going to be a big loss for City and a big loss for the league, because literally, as you said, the greatest ever goal scorer in the league's history. That's you can't just replace that overnight. He has been so good, and it is a bit of a shame to see him leave. But I think for anybody who wasn't a City fan, you're probably breathing a bit of a sigh of relief, because okay, good, the guy who scores goals is gone now.
Yeah,
and like you said, the India seems to be the destination that a lot of the rumours are based around, as we have heard ourselves. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. If it is in India, wherever it is, it'll be definitely on much better money than he'd have gotten anywhere in the A-League, that's for sure.
Of course, also leaving Melbourne City is Curtis Good as well. He leaves as City's record games capped player. As a note of his contribution as well, Melbourne City have altered the Clubman of the Year award to be renamed the Curtis Good Award as well. So the line for him was also outside of the A-League, so we'll see where that shapes up when this season ends. But that will do for this episode of the A-Leagues of Our Own podcast. Make sure to like, review, comment on all the episodes, all that good stuff, and stick around for the off-season as well. There won't be A-League content, but there's going to be plenty else as well, so make sure you stay tuned then. But Poletti, thank you for tonight.
Thank you.
Christian Montegan, thank you, mate.
Thank you, Lockie. Congrats on the win as well.
Thank you, Jacob Stevens.
Thanks, Lockie.
Begrudgingly. All right, thank you all for listening. We will be back. We haven't quite decided yet. We'll figure it out later. Monday or Tuesday, because the Dub Grand Final is pretty big as well. But thank you all for listening. Goodbye.